I'm Matt. I'm doing the second affirmative constructive. I want to start off with subpoint A, how Caitlin says that the California deficit is horrible. There's really no argument to that, especially from the negative side. That obviously, California is in a big deficit. It affects all of us, which is a significant impact because it affects everybody that's a taxpayer. Obviously, it's an impact. All of us are affected by it. I wanted to go to subpoint B, where he says some researchers did one study that deters a murder. I'm not quite sure where he even got this information, so let's just disregard that. Let's go to what Caitlin said. She said, cutting from law enforcement because California's budget is bad. So I wanted to read a report from the Alameda Police. Alameda Police and Fire Department had to let a man drown because of budget constraints. May 30th, 2011, by Alan Wang, an Emmy Award-winning journalist. Alameda police and firefighters stood by and watched as a man drowned off Crown Beach in Alameda on Monday. Authorities are now trying to explain why they had no choice but to stand on the shoreline. According to Alameda Police Lieutenant Joe McNiff, we're not trained to go into the water. Obviously, the type of gear that we have on, we do not have the equipment that you would use to go into the water. The Alameda Fire Department says that budget constraints are preventing it from recertifying its men in land-based water rescues. Without it, the city would be open to liability. They're not even giving them enough money to do their job, let alone anything else. So we need money for California. That's our significant problem. They're cutting from law enforcement agencies, which is horrible because that affects everybody directly. I want to talk about in our first contention, subpoint C, where he said that there's no impact of 1,000 police officers lost. Well, according to the population in California, there's 37 million people in California. So if you take away 1,000 officers and then put them on 3 different beats or shifts, that's 1,268 people per shift for 90,000 officers. If you take 1,000 away, that's 1,411 officers. 1,411 people to every one officer on their shift. That's 143 more people that one officer is responsible for in the state of California for one day. That is a very significant impact. That's almost 12 people an hour for their shift. That's a lot more people. Subpoint D. Jason doesn't even really argue Caitlin's subpoint D when she said budget cuts have a direct impact on crime. So I wanted to read one from the CNN USA by David Ariosto. Newark, like the nation, is implementing cutbacks in police, which leads to a rise in violent crimes. And Newark is by no means unique in implementing police cutbacks to save city money. Meanwhile, violent crime soared 18% nationwide last year, marking the country's first rise since 1993, while property crime also spiked for the first time in a decade. Violent crimes are rising, and it's because of our budget crisis in the nation, and especially in California. I want to go to contention 2, where Caitlin said, life without parole is the best alternative. It is. It is the best alternative. It's going to save us money in the long run. There's no room for error. You can't kill somebody and bring them back. That's what the death penalty does, unfortunately. But if they do have life without parole, and then they do find more evidence, then they can bring them back. This is specifically for subpoint. He didn't really read a subpoint, but he said, Jason said something about there's likelihood increase because of the numbers. He was talking about the death penalty would decrease the amount of cost it would cost to California. Actually, that's very untrue. I have research saying the death penalty costs $1 million more each trial by Arthur Al Ercon, LLB, Senior Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 9th District. Our research has revealed that $4 billion of state and federal taxpayer money has been expended administrating the death penalty in California since 1978. With a cost in 2009 of approximately $184 billion above what taxpayers would have spent without the death penalty, the costs associated with death penalty trials that took place between 1983 and 2006 averaged about $1 million more per trial than the cost of average non-death penalty homicide trials. This conclusion is also supported by the fact that there are several significant, easily identifiable costs incurred in every death penalty trial that are not incurred in non-death penalty homicide. If you get rid of the death penalty, it leaves a lot more room for our budget to decrease. Subpoint C in contention 2, Caitlin said the money saved could be used for better law enforcement. Obviously, if 18% rose in the nationwide violent crimes, we need a definite impact or something significant to change in order for us to reassure that we can even protect our citizens. There's more. I wanted to also go into further detail about how much more it costs for the death penalty. The state spends $117 million a year on capital punishment. This is from the 8 members of the 23-member California Commission on the Fair Administration of Justice. The resources that go into a death penalty case are enormous. The pursuit of execution adds millions at phase of the process. From trial to appeal and habeas proceedings, for example, a death penalty trial costs counties at least $1.1 million more than a conventional murder trial. The state spends at least an additional $117 million a year on capital punishment, and about half of it on prison expenses that exceed the usual cost of housing inmates, and the rest on arguing and judging death penalty appeals. I now stand open for cross-examination.
Okay, you said something about the death penalty costs more for each trial, correct?
Yes.
So if the death penalty causes plea bargains, wouldn't there be less trials, and therefore it's an uneven comparison?
But then what would be the point of the death penalty if you're not even using it?
It is being used in plea bargains.
So it's used as a scare tactic, it's not actually being used.
Correct. It's getting people to plea to a lesser charge so that they don't get the death penalty.
I haven't heard any evidence about a plea bargain, so I'm going to stick with mine.
Okay. And you say that the fire department let somebody drown?
Fire and police were there, yes.
And so there were, did you say if there were any lifeguards on duty?
No, I did not check if there was lifeguards on duty.
Because wouldn't that be the lifeguard's job, not the fire department or fire station?
Well, I'm assuming if the fire department and the police were called...
And so nobody in the police department and fire department can swim?
Yes, they could, but they'd be liable for lawsuits later because they're not certified. And that's what they were talking about. Because they don't have enough money to be recertified, they can't even do their job.
So they were worried about being sued, so they let somebody die?
Yes. And there's 75 other individuals there waiting. And because they don't have enough money, which what we're trying to do is get rid of the death penalty to save money.
So you're saying the
so
police and fire
job.
department aren't doing their jobs by letting people die on their watch?
No, they're doing their jobs correctly because they can't do it. They'd be open for lawsuits.
Okay. That's it.
Well,